Previously on All Things Unexplained.
A law enforcement officer's job is to find probable cause that a crime occurred and to present that probable cause to a judge or a magistrate who will issue a warrant. It's the district attorney's job to prosecute that. But by the same token, we have to give the district attorney enough evidence, enough ammunition in order to get a conviction. And sometimes at a case, even after we've developed probable causes, somebody did it. The detectives, and not just me, but detectives will continue digging before the case actually goes to trial, looking for more information and more clues or more evidence that something occurred or that our guy did it.
All Things Unexplained. Hosted by Dr. Mounts.
Let's face it, we were always ready to roll without him anyway.
CJ Derringer.
Ain't nobody perfect, right?
And Smitty Neebs.
I've never planned out hardly anything my whole life. I just free ball.
Featuring Cajun Man.
I'm just old nobody, somebody looking for somebody.
Gut instinct is just another tool when it's treated right. And you've got so many different tools in your toolbox as an investigator: the DNA, the fingerprints, the other forensic evidence, the autopsy, the expert who listens to the interview, and the polygraph, which is used as a tool. All these things shouldn't be taken separately. All of them, it takes all of them to bring together for a good case or a good investigation. And you shouldn't put all your eggs in one basket and just entirely go on basic instinct. I've known detectives that could walk out into a parking lot and pick out individuals or pick out cars and say, if you run that tag, that person's got a warrant on them. And they would be right, 75% of the time.
Wow.
Just by basing it on things that they see or what have you. Some people call that profiling, and some people call it a gut instinct. So it's just something. It's just one of those things. One of the parts. It's part of the toolbox that you carry as an investigator. And
Right.
but by the same token, it's like I tell my young ladies, if you bring a boyfriend home and your dog doesn't like him, do not. Just hang it up. He's not worth it. If the dog don't like,
Especially psychic dogs.
That's it. Well, the dog is, yeah, exactly. The dog knows. So go with that. Go with the dog's gut instinct. If the boyfriend isn't liked by the pets, and I tell them that, and I say, listen to your dad somewhat, and your mom, and they kind of know what's going on a little bit. But even if you don't believe your mom or dad, if the dog says it, go with the dog.
Oh, yeah. Scott, I couldn't help but think when you were telling us about some of these cases, the opening introduction to the show Law and Order, which I used to watch religiously, the police who investigate the crimes and the district attorneys who prosecute the offenders. These are their stories. And it made me wonder, I've watched so many shows, and as all of us have, and movies. In your experience, what are some of the biggest misconceptions that people have about police detective work?
The processing of evidence. DNA results, you see that, especially on FBI shows. The DNA doesn't match, and it's like they just collected it 15, 20 minutes ago. And that takes a while to process. And it has to be done exactly. And documentation. You don't see the detectives doing all the write-ups on the reports. You don't see all the... you never see on Law and Order them following a bum lead that ends up just nothing.
Right.
There's always... you're seeing the good stuff. Of course, they have to shut the case down in, an hour or so. But
that's right.
Yeah. But my favorite cop show, and it's not a cop show, is Perry Mason.
Oh,
I love me some
Raymond Burr.
That's it.
I love the old ones. I love the new ones.
The old ones, yeah.
If you could call them new ones, but he was on that. He was Perry Mason a very long time ago, and then I don't know if he reprised the role, if it just kept running for that long.
Yes, I got curious and I looked it up on Wikipedia the other day. There was actually a couple of different. There was the original black and whites that we see. The last episode was actually done in color, and then several years later they brought him back as the new Perry Mason.
Yeah.
And Della was in there, and Raymond Burr, and I don't remember if Paul Drake was in there or not, but
he was a tremendous actor. And you know who else I loved? I loved Barnaby Jones too.
Yes, Barnaby Jones. That's a real good show too. And of course there's Matlock.
That was a good one.
Which is actually, Matlock is based on a real lawyer in Georgia. Outside, and he still practices law, as a matter of fact. And I'm going to do a podcast on him because he was connected with the homicide with a Major League Baseball player in the 60s. And it was an old case, an old homicide that was committed when the Major League ball player was in his teens, his early teens, and it was basically a stupid accident type thing. And he represented him when he finally ended up going to court on that one case. And that's actually how they found the character for Matlock. So.
Oh, interesting. Speaking of misconceptions, Scott, I think it's interesting how you talked about how much you liked the show Perry Mason, right? But Perry Mason was a defense attorney. Is it a misconception? I feel like they usually portray police detectives at not having very good relationships with defense attorneys.
Sometimes that happens. I've always had a good relationship with most of the attorneys in town, and I have testified as a witness for them in other cases. I had a gentleman that I didn't have him. It was actually a federal case. Post office was after this guy for some cases, and the local attorney asked me to come and testify as a expert witness, and he interviewed me on certain aspects of what the types of crimes that this guy was involved in, and they were juvenile related. And his perspective was to get the guy some help, and that was, he pled him ended up pleading him guilty, and we'll get him some, instead of actual lockup time, he was trying to get him into a mental health facility. And it's, after hearing his particular case, it sounded like a good idea. So we get called on to work with a lot of people, and the defense attorneys are just some of the people.
Yep.
Eating a lot of lunches with some DAs.
Have you ever heard of the case of Leochi? That's there in Tupelo, Mississippi. Still unsolved.
No, I don't think
she
so.
was 13 years old. She disappeared from her home one morning, and they have yet to ever find her. They had some bloody clothing, some bloody items, but they have yet to find her. That's been 28 years ago, and they kind of just was really national news for a long time. It was featured on Nancy Grace 2020 Unsolved Mysteries, a lot of different things, and theories have come out about that. It's still an open investigation, obviously, because she's never been found. So thought you might be interested in that case sometimes.
Yeah, very much. I have to
Her
look
last
into
name's
that.
OCCHI.
Might make a good podcast.
I was in high school when it happened.
OCCHI.
I tell you, one famous police duo I forgot about. I don't know how I forget about him. Joe Friday, Dragnet.
Yes, Joe Friday.
What was his catchphrase? He had a catchphrase. It was
Oh, he's very polite too.
Yeah.
Always yes ma'aming and
oh yeah.
No ma'am, and
One of my favorite Hill Street Blues.
yes, Hill Street Blues. That I enjoyed Hill Street Blues because that came on when was on when I actually started police work. So that had a lot of impact on me.
Just the
And-
facts, ma'am.
Yeah.
That was Joe Friday.
That's it. Just the facts. Yeah.
Just the
Good
facts.
shows.
Well, we've been chatting about Lunsford, former detective and author and podcast. I feel like we could listen to so many of your stories for 5 days here, but you do have your own podcast. Why don't you go ahead and tell our listeners where they can find your books one more time and listen to your podcasts as well?
I'm on a lot of different platforms. You can actually just do a Google search for Felon File Podcast, and it'll pop up either on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or some of the others. They're out there. Or you can go to felonfile.com, and there's a link on that. And listening to past podcasts, I've got, I think, about 130 of them out there. I try to do one a week, and been doing them for a little while. And the early stuff, I'm just trying to figure out and get the audios down and figure out where I'm coming from and how to talk and how to do it. And it's still a work in progress, and I'm still trying my best to improve them. So I take I'm very willing to take criticism if people have ideas on that. You can also go to scottlunsfordauthor.com, and there's a link there to my books on Amazon, and Barnes & Noble also carry them. There you can get them through their website. There's a couple of bookstores that carry them locally in the Asheville, Western North Carolina area. And you can reach me at felonfile@gmail.com as well. And just like you guys, if you like my stuff and want to help with the podcast, maybe defray some costs on getting copies or getting fulfilling requests for records. Sometimes different agencies want to charge you, $5 or $6 for somebody to look your stuff up for you. You can go to Buy Me a Coffee /felonfile on there, and there's a small blog there too that you can hook up to and see what's upcoming as far as my podcast go. And I'm working on a new book for my young people series called The Time Traveling Teacher. And
exciting!
Yes, that's gonna be having some fun with that. And who better to teach history than a time traveler, right?
Wonderful.
So,
That's right. If I could be a
suit me.
if I could be
Smithy,
a
I
time
see your
traveler,
future there.
I would go back in time and never become a teacher. That's what. That's,
Amen. Me too.
that sounds like an awesome book idea.
Fallon File is such a fun name, and it's a great podcast. I have to say, when I was looking through, trying to pick some different ones to listen to, I kept scrolling and scrolling. I could not believe how many podcasts you have released. It's awesome. So I got to listen to some of the older ones and some of the newer ones, and I think I have like 10 days worth more to listen to, and I intend to, because they were quite fascinating. Some were a little harder to stomach than others, I have to admit. So for those of you with tender hearts like mine, there's some things on there, but all very fascinating.
I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you guys, and would like to do it sometime.
Yeah.
This podcast is made possible by listeners like you. To support this show, head over to buymeacoffee.com/unexplained, and you can become an Unexplained one. You can pick up all things Unexplained hoodies, tote bags, and signed books from yours truly. You can sign up for Close Encounters of the First and Second Kind with CJ, Smitty, and myself. And if you're feeling truly daring, you can even go for Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Special shout out to Coma Toast Tacos, which is home of mysterious publications like this podcast and my Bigfoot books over at squatchin.com. And now more with Detective Scott Lunsford. We do have a closing segment I was hoping to do with you, though, Detective Lunsford, if you're up for it.
Okay.
So, not to put you on the spot here, but I've got 5 infamous unsolved crimes, pretty much known the world over, and I would love to get your hot takes on these 5 infamous unsolved crimes.
All right.
So just your hot take on each of these. I'll start with one of my favorites, Lizzie Borden.
I think Lizzie Borden did it. And I also think the reasoning that she did it was because her father was messing with her and taking inappropriate actions with her, and this was her retaliation. And that's why she was able, her sisters knew about it, and why she was able to continue living with her sisters after she killed mom and dad. And I think she felt she had to kill. She was probably just initially wanting to take dad out, and felt that once she did that, she of course had to take mom out because mom just wouldn't understand. But 40 whacks.
That is an amazing hot take, I just have to say. That is incredible. Isn't it fascinating that all that time ago that Lizzie Borden was tried for those crimes, and as a woman all that time ago that she was not convicted?
Yes. We have a saying in the South. Sometimes, referring to a man, sometimes a man just needs to be shot, and sometimes the courts agree. I've got some really good stories about that, so maybe for another time.
Yes, you do, in your podcast, in fact. In your podcast.
Yeah, let's have you back on it another time to talk about that. So let's go on to our next hot take here. Great hot take on Lizzie Borden. So our next one I've got for you, D.B. Cooper.
Oh, my man, D.B.
That's a hard one.
I used to. I was fascinated by him a while, and I used to have that as my. Back when we were doing MySpace, I had him use that as a handle. I was D.B. Cooper Jr., and I used the the composite image of him as my profile picture. But
Oh, nice.
DB did it. I think he missed. I think the guy that did it got away. I don't think he was found. I am pretty sure that his body would have been found. We found parachute. We found part of the money. That young boy found the money in the river. I
Yep.
think he was probably, well, I know he was military. Yeah, I think he was military. I think he just got in over his head, and he did not. He was like one of those guys who he thought more of his experience and his skills than he probably actually had. And when he jumped from the plane and opened the chute, I'm thinking that the jerk probably broke the strap that carried the money, and the money ended up falling and separating from him, and he ended up in the river, and where part of it was found later, and he ended up in a tree in a wooded area and was able to get away. I like to think that he got away.
Right.
I don't like
Yeah,
the idea that, but that's just kind of the romantic aspect of it, I guess.
It's interesting how that with DB that would be viewed as a kind of a happy ending, right? If this particular criminal got away, it would kind of be viewed as a happy ending. And I actually saw a recent theory that he did land there and buried the money somewhere along the riverbank in hopes of returning for it, but actually a flood was on record recently after and before he could recover it, that it possibly washed it out. So great hot take. I hope DB made it out there too. Now this next one will ring a bell with our listeners and most people around the world. Never was solved. A truly tragic case. JonBenet Ramsey.
There was a recent show on that a documentary that I watched, and the detective that was working the case believes that a person entered through the basement through a window, and in reading his information, there was an article that was published, and reading what he was saying, I agree. I think it was a third unconnected to the, well, not necessarily unconnected to the family, but I think that somebody came in. She may have been a victim of a stalker, but I don't think the parents had anything to do with it, or the brother.
Right, yeah. Good take. Now, you mentioned earlier about a particular person who would find themselves in a hot place one day in the afterlife, and I kind of think this about our next person here, but I would love to hear your hot take. We're going to do two more. This is the last one. Casey Anthony.
Yeah, that's a special place right there, waiting for that person. Yeah. That's just. I actually had the opportunity to talk with a detective that performed the polygraph exam on her.
Oh, wow.
And he was teaching a class I was in, and yeah, she did it. There's a place waiting for her.
Yeah, so I was trying to jog my memory, and this is not one of the cases I had for you for a hot take, but I recall with the OJ case, okay, if you just go by the strict definition of the words, some of the things presented could lead to a reasonable doubt, I suppose, like the glove, for example. But throughout the entire Casey Anthony trial, I do not recall anything that gave me a shred of reasonable doubt. What do you think was the biggest thing that led to her acquittal? Was it just the throwing different possibilities at the wall and seeing what stuck? Was it just the act of doing that, do you think, or what?
I think it has a lot to do with the system that we have in place right now, the jury system, and this. We don't know exactly what happened in the jury room when everybody was discussing it, and we don't know. We weren't in the jurors' shoes when they heard the information and saw the defendant at the same time. So they're getting. Try not to second guess. They're getting their information from several different sources. The jury pool is, and they make their decision based on that, based on the testimony, based on the feeling in the room. You can, of course, you can argue that that's not the case, but everybody's been somewhere where all of a sudden the whole, maybe in a business meeting, and somebody walks in and the room just chills, and everybody knows that something is going to happen. So, or something is going to be said, or they hear an innuendo. We don't know exactly what the jury heard and what they felt at the time, and then what they discussed about. And that's the system we have. Our peers are supposed to make the determination, and they're supposed to err on the side of caution. So
Right.
that happens.
Right.
And it's the best. It's the system we have right now. So until something better comes along.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a good take. And so last but not least, what I would probably have to describe as the most infamous unsolved criminal crime of all time. I wonder if CJ and Smitty has a guess as to what this might
do.
be.
I'm pretty sure it's Jack the Ripper.
Hoping it's about Cookie Monster.
That,
No?
Smitty nailed it. Detective Lunsford, would love to get your hot take on Cookie Monster. No, not Cookie Monster. Jack the
Ripper. There was some DNA testing done later that tended to point towards this artist that, what was the writer's name? She wrote a book about it.
Patricia.
A nonfiction work.
Yeah.
Patricia Cornwell.
I've read it.
Cornwell. Yes. And her direction makes a lot of sense when what she wrote about, I think. I'm kind of the opinion, though, that the guy left England and came to the United States because there was some crimes that were remarkably similar to his activity that occurred in New York and some other places. We had a Ripper in Atlanta, Georgia. They called him the Georgia Ripper, or the Atlanta Ripper, and he killed, they think, up to 14 people, but they're positive about like 5 or 6. Perhaps maybe he was involved with that, but there's some good evidence to think that he made it to America and got away, and probably got killed here or died here, just got sick and passed away. The idea that he had to have been a doctor, I don't think is valid. I think anybody that was a hunter or a butcher or a good cook, because back at that time frame, you got your meat, and you had to really know what you're doing in order to clean it out, to prepare it for food purposes. So I wouldn't put all my eggs in the basket that he was a doctor like some people seem to think he was.
Right. And if it is true, if they did make their way to America, that probably excludes the theory of it being a member of the royal family, and maybe puts it back into the sailor category, for example.
I would think a sailor would be able to have, over time, develop some skill at dissection. Would be quite handy with a sharp knife.
Oh yeah, terrific hot take there, Detective Lunsford. I appreciate that.
So did Cookie Monster eat the cookies? But I didn't read. going to say yes.
Of course, Cookie Monster made the cookies. That's what a Cookie Monster does.
Not if I got there first.
Well,
Well, thank you so much for being with us. It's been great.
Well, thank you for having me. I've very much enjoyed it.
yeah, this has been an entertaining evening. Like I said, I would love to have you back and get your opinion on some cases out there in the public, right now, and have you back on as a guest to discuss some of those.
Be happy to
Yes,
be
sir.
happy to help in any way. And like my wife says, I talk too much, and you're giving me you're taking a lot of listening off of her shoulders. So
Well,
she's happy.
so say CJ and Smitty keep me tamped
Why do you
down
think
to
these
something.
two wanted to start a podcast?
I usually can't get a word in edgewise with mounts around, so,
This has been fascinating, though. Truly fascinating.
Yes, it has been great. I sure do appreciate it.
Not a problem. Anytime. Be happy to help in any way I can.
Well, thank you so much again. CJ, you got anything else?
No, just thank you to everybody who tuned in, listening. We would love to get anybody's feedback on our social media pages. You can send us questions or links or other things to dig into. We love researching all things unexplained.
That's right. Thanks, Detective Lunsford. Smitty, you want to take us out of here?
Be curious, be strange, and watch for all things unexplained.
You've been listening to All Things Unexplained. If you liked this podcast, please do give us a 5-star rating and leave us a review. If you would like to hear more All Things Unexplained, be sure to follow us wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you'd like to learn more about our show, you can visit us at www.allthingsunexplained.com. And if you'd like to support our show, please do visit buymeacoffee.com/unexplained. A special thanks to our producer, director, sound mixer, editor, and the man that wears far too many hats. No, seriously, he has a lot of hats, Dr. Tim Mounts. Without you, we couldn't keep the lights on. Thanks for listening to All Things Unexplained.